Welcome again, everyone, to another lesson on the Yalak Emet channel on YouTube. You can find me as well on Twitter and Patreon as Rethinking the Torah. I've got another lesson on the Torah today, and I've called this one a fatal Torah contradiction. I'll begin by reading from Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 and 27. Now notice that the contradiction I'm bringing to you today that I've seen is from the opening book of the Torah. So this opens the entire Torah, the entire Bible, and that just feels a little bit scary. But I really want you to take note of what I'm saying. So Genesis chapter 1, 26 and 27 says, "And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness." And right here it says image, tselem. It's the likeness or resemblance of, and we know normally we think of that image, while people have different ideas of what the image of God really means. In general, an image is that which we understand to be a representative of God. It represents God, and it represents God so closely that one might actually say it represents him directly, or it is the direct presentation of God himself to man. So even when you deal with idolatry, the idols that they made were an image that represented the God. And the reason why people would bow before the gods, worship them, and do different rituals for the gods and in front of the gods was because that image, even though it was made out of wood or stone, was so directly related to the God that it was an actual physical representation or manifestation of the God. The same way, like your body would be a representation of the inner you. So when you speak to someone, you meet someone, you're shaking their hand, you're talking to them, and so on. That image that they're seeing really is you. It's just because that's all they can see and interact with. So your very image is you, even though we normally say the inner you is the real you. But the outer physical part of you that can make contact with someone else, that's a representation of you so fully, so completely, that you cannot really separate the inner person from the outer person or from the physical body. So the image of God, as we've understood it from Sunday school coming on up to now when you're older, the image of God, no matter what they tell you, is understood by believers of the scriptures to be the same as God himself. Even an angel appearing to people, like in Exodus chapter 3, an angel was in the fire when Moses saw the bush burning. They say that angel was God. So the image of that angel is really an image of God, and they teach that the angel was actually God himself, because the angel or the image seen in the fire represented God and was God himself. So you can't separate the angel from God, because the scriptures actually say that the angel was actually Elohim. So the angel or the image of the angel is the same as God or the image of God, and the angel was Elohim or God, the so-called creator. So this word Selem for image means a phantom, an illusion, resemblance. So, and it says even a vain show. So what? It's showing something. How are you going to show an image of yourself if that's not you? If you are God, how are you going to show an image of God to people and you are not God according to that image that you are showing to people? Then you are showing a lie. So the image that you show to people must be God. Now, if Adam and Eve were made in the image of God, is God showing himself to earth? See, you have to really think that through. But let me get off that so I can move on some more. So let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish. Watch that word dominion, because I'm coming back with that at the end to really tie up the Torah contradiction in the book that opens the entire Torah of God. But dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. Now, you know, in a lot of these deeper esoteric thoughts that sometimes we call Eastern thought, it's really a worldwide thought, but sometimes you might also hear it called a New Age philosophy, New Age thinking, and so on. But they really say things like the real you, the inner you, is a part of this whole initial spirit or primordial force, something like that, that created us all. And so some people will say we are all God and we just put on body. There are some issues with that, but I just want you to kind of have that in your mind to help you try to find your way through all of this lesson. So it says that he made man in his own image. Now, how can we deny that man is God? Because the text of truth says that the image is expressing God. Now, if you go to the New Testament, for the New Testament believers, they say Paul, who was in a mighty way stopped by the Son of God, supposedly so, on the way to Damascus, and given a powerful, breathtaking inclusion into the gospel of Jesus Christ, which according to the New Testament believers is the final revelation of God. But in Hebrews chapter 1 verse 3, this Paul, apparently he's saying, he's speaking of Christ now, Jesus, who being the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person, and upholding all things by the word of his power, when he had by himself purged our sins, sat down on the right hand of the majesty on high. Now, right hand to some would just mean he sat with all the power, or he reigns. So it's not necessarily the case that there are two thrones or maybe three, and he is sitting on the right hand of his actual physical father, but it just means he's got the power to sit in that one throne, if you can imagine a throne being there. So sitting on the right hand just means he is the same as the Father, so he sits in the Father's seat as the one who has all power, like he himself said, all power is given unto me in heaven and earth. So he's sitting there in the seat of power because he is the power, the one who has all the power, like he declared, and sitting in that seat because he is actually God or the Creator. That's what this Paul is trying to tell you. Now, the reason why he can sit in power and have all of that power is because he is the express image of his person, or the express image of God. How can he be the express image of God or express the image of God if he is not God? So this second Adam is able to express the image of God because as a second Adam, he is actually God, and it is proven in the scriptures, if you're only staying in the text, because it says that he is the express image or the expression of the image. You cannot express your own image to your household, to your friends, to your people at your work and so on, if you are not that person. So when Bill goes to work, they see the image of Bill coming through the front door of the office. Once they see that image and it falls on their retina, they know that is Bill, because the real Bill on the inside, that inner spiritual person, is expressed in the physical bodily form that they are seeing with their eyes as the image comes through the door. So if this Christ is expressing the image of God, he is expressing the image of the inner God because he is actually God himself. That's how you would have to understand it. So he is the expression of the image of God because he is actually God. Now let's run over to Genesis chapter 3, and I'm really happy you're listening to this because you're really going to hear some nice stuff throughout this lesson. Genesis chapter 3, let's run over there. And now the contradiction will begin to pick up as I'm going to run through a little bit of chapter 3 and chapter 2. So Genesis chapter 3, I'm going to go to verse 22. And it says, "And the Lord God said, Behold, the man is become as one of us to know good and evil." Remember, they'd already been tempted and they took of the fruit that they should not take of. "So he's become as one of us to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever." And then it goes on. I don't need the rest right now. Now, is this a contradiction that we're seeing right here? In my view, I think it really is. Because Torah teachers will tell you that when he breathed into man the breath of life, he was breathing in the Torah, he was putting in the Torah. And you'll find it in Genesis 2 verse 7, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." So he is breathing into man the breath of life, and they say that's the spirit, or that's the Torah that is being breathed into the man at that point. And we know when you deal with the Torah, the law of the Lord, the teachings of the Lord, it's going to teach you what is right and what is wrong. Now look at Deuteronomy chapter 30 verse 19. "I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live." Notice that they are supposed to choose life. He's encouraging them to choose life, that they can live. How can you live without the life that comes from the Torah? Because the Torah is life. But how can they choose the right thing to get life if they do not know what life is all about? And that life is the Torah. It is found in the Torah, in the teachings of the Lord. Why don't they continue to choose death that Adam and Eve chose, and that the other nations that came up later on in the Torah chose? Why don't they choose all that? But they choose the Most High according to his Torah because they know, based on the teachings of the Torah that they've been given so far and that passed on to them through the others that came before them and the patriarchs and so on, they can choose the right thing because they have the know-how of how things work spiritually. They know some things are good, some things are evil, some things will lead you to the Lord, some things will cut you off from the Lord. So they are able to make the right choice in choosing to follow the Most High, because they can distinguish between good and evil. They can tell when this is the voice of the Lord or not. That's why sometimes later on in the Bible, like in Ezekiel or Jeremiah and so on, they would try to kill the prophets or punish them, get rid of them, throw them in dungeons like Jeremiah, because they knew that was the Lord. They said even to Isaiah, get you out of the way. Get out of the way, prophet. Why? Because they knew he was bringing the life of God through his words. They knew he was bringing truth and life. And so because they could distinguish and see that this is life that the prophet is bringing, but this is death that we are walking in and we don't want to stop walking in it, they can say, get away from us, prophet. So they can choose. So they are able to choose because they have the knowledge of the Torah that allows them to choose, so they know. This is the same Torah that they said to us was breathed into Adam in Genesis chapter 2 verse 7, and he breathed into the man the breath of knowledge. In other words, the way I've put it in previous videos is that when he breathed into the man and he breathed in his Torah, he was breathing in God. So the only ear, remember now I said, if Christ is the express image because he was in the image of God, then if Adam was in the image of God, then why is Adam not God the same way that Christ is God? You understand that? So now you understand that if he is breathing in the breath of life into Adam or breathing in the Torah, then if you ask, well, how is he going to breathe in the Torah into Adam? If Adam is already God, how can he be breathing in the Torah into God? Because that's the only ear that God can breathe. It's just his own word, if I might put it that way. God lives and breathes his Torah all the time. That's why God never dies, because he is connected to the life of the Torah all the time. It's in his very makeup. So Adam cannot receive anything, cannot vibrate anything, cannot participate in anything other than. So the text is showing you that that Adam, according to his physicality, has to breathe in that which brought him to be. The same way you would say Christ was brought about, according to his flesh. But Adam would have to be God. Now that's not the main point I'm pushing, but I'm just trying to let you know that the Torah was there in Adam and he could choose it the same way in Deuteronomy 30 verse 19 they could choose life, because they knew something in Deuteronomy chapter 30 verse 19 that could let them choose. It says the same way they could choose in the garden as well. Now, how can they choose in the garden if they did not have the knowledge of good and evil to discern, to tell what's right and wrong, and to make choices? So they already had the Torah right there. Torah made them. So now, if they're able to choose what is right and wrong, choose between that, that means they already knew. If the woman had a little bit of apprehension when the serpent talked to her, did God say, it would only have to be because she was already aware that there was something good about keeping the instructions that the Most High had given to them, and something wrong with trying to do anything different than that. So instead of rushing right to it, she's like maybe a little bit scared or whatever, but because she's probably never heard anything like this before, like someone presenting it in a way where he's not quite lying to her. He's more asking a question, did God say? But she can tell the insinuation is that you should go ahead and break the rule. So she's like, well, he actually said don't touch it. So the only reason why she's trying to battle right there in her mind is because she already knows the difference between good and evil, like in Deuteronomy chapter 30 verse 19. How could she know good and evil if she never had the knowledge of good and evil before taking of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? They already knew the knowledge of good and evil before they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This means that they, unlike what they taught us, cultured us for years to think from the teachings of the Bible, they did not get the knowledge of good and evil by eating from that particular tree. They already had it. So the Torah is deceiving us, and the Torah teachers, the Bible teachers, by teaching us for all these thousands of years to think that they got the knowledge of good and evil only because they ate from that. They already knew it. That's why she was battling. So now, let's go now. Okay, well, I just read it. So now, if you go now back to Genesis 3:22, I'll just read a part of it again. The man has become as one of us to know good and evil. How can he become like one of us? There's two parts I want to bring out. To know good and evil, when they already knew good and evil, because when the Most High was saying, eat from this tree and eat from that tree and so on and eat everything and blah, 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 except this particular one, he's already teaching them Torah knowledge right there. So he is instilling in them the knowledge of good and evil even before they ate. So God then is actually lying, deceiving us in the text, deceiving the reader, and all his teachers and prophets and pastors and scribes and everybody continues the lie of God by teaching the rest of the world for all these thousands of years and teaching Israel back then that this is really what happened, that the man became as one of us like God said. But God was lying initially, because the man cannot become as one of us to know good and evil just because he ate from the tree, when the man already knew good and evil before they ate from the tree. And the reason why they did not eat from it all along until the serpent came was because they knew the difference between good and evil before they even got the temptation to eat from the tree. So because they knew, they knew it was evil to eat from that tree, so they never ate. Because according to the conditioning in your mind from the text, you would understand that prior to the serpent coming with that temptation, they were avoiding eating from that particular tree. Why? Why would they have avoided it? Because they already knew it was evil to do so. So they had the knowledge of good and evil before eating from it. They only ate because the serpent came in and they went along with his temptation. So the knowledge of good and evil was something they already knew and participated in exercising that knowledge of it in their life by walking the right path before they took and ate from the tree. The next part of that now, to become, the man is become as one of us, to know, is also a deception and a Torah contradiction, because the Torah says in Genesis chapter 1, 26 and 27 that he made man in his own image. So then the image, like I started out the lesson saying, is that which lets you be like God or as God, or in some kind of way be God himself, like Christ is the express image of. So then the man and the woman would be the image of. That's why they call themselves gods and goddesses from early times, because that's how they thought of themselves. They saw themselves as being that. So the man is become as one of us. If Christ is the express image, because he was created by the word and is the reflection of the word, then the only reflection of the word on earth prior to the serpent tempting them would have been the man and the woman. And that also means, according to the text, that they were the very creation of the word, because the word said, let us. So the word created them. So they are the very expression of God, and you cannot get any closer to God than through them. And they give birth to other children who express God as well, or none of us would know anything about God today. So God continued to be born on earth through every child that came on earth linked to the first people, because they born God, or they birth God on earth, because they are. How are you going to give birth to God if you are not God? So this was a God and a goddess that was created at first. So to become as one of us is a deception, very clearly, because they cannot become something that they already are. They already are that. They are the image of God, the expression of God. They represent God. They are God. Just like the angel in the fire was Elohim, the angel was God. They are God. Just like the prophet that speaks for God is God. They were God. And how can you be that if you do not know the knowledge of good and evil. The Torah is contradicting itself when God says the man has become like one of us to know good and evil, because they were already like God, being made in the image of God, and they already knew the knowledge of good and evil before taking from that fruit. Let's move on. Because there is no becoming when you already are that. Can you become you? You take some course to become like a pastor, and you're a pastor for 15 years, and you go take some other course about church management and so on. 15 years later, a new breakthrough, whatever, in how to run your church. After 15 years of pastoring, do you become a pastor at that point after 15 years of pastoring? No, you already are what you are. Now, let's run back now to chapter 1 and verse 28. Hear what it says. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. Notice it says, have dominion. And by the end it says, over every living thing. Dominion, we normally think of that as they were just ruling the earth. So you can't even think that they were just situated in one spot in this garden. No, they were worldwide. And you got to get out of your mind that it was a single man and woman anyway, because they were a people. This was the first family of earth, and they were a people, and to have dominion over every living thing and over the fish of the sea. So means you have to go down in the bottom of the sea and go all over the earth as well to have dominion over everything. How does one man and one woman do that? It was a people, a whole entire body of people, a nation of people, and they spread over all the earth. And of course, they would have had to do that to have dominion over all the earth. How are you going to exercise dominion and you haven't gone all these places and gone down in the sea and so on? That's why they knew from ancient times how to do great things, and they tell you all kinds of lies, like some alien came from outer space and Anunnaki and whatever, and taught, and fallen angels, and taught them how to build weapons and makeup and scientific instruments and tools and so on. No, these are the people who grew and spread themselves all over the earth, built the pyramids and everything, and had dominion over all the earth by doing this. And they were able to do all that with the knowledge of good and evil, or the knowledge of how the world operates. But subdue dominion includes the knowledge of good and evil and the knowledge of how the creation works. So they already had that knowledge put into them by the Torah that was spoken into them in Genesis chapter 1 before they even ate of the tree in Genesis chapter 3. Let's go over now to Genesis chapter 2, verse 15 to 17. And the Lord God took the man and put him into the garden of Eden to keep it and to dress it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. That is proof right there in those verses, Genesis 2:15 to 17, that God already taught man to have the knowledge of good and evil, because in the day thou eatest of it thereof thou shalt surely die. Is that not knowledge of something bad happening? Something evil happening? If you do one evil, the next evil happens to you. So they already knew, and they would of course know the good part, that if we eat the other good stuff that he said, that we'd be fine, the herbs and so on and whatever, and of all the other trees and so on. So God already put into them the knowledge of good and evil, and they knew it and understood it. before they ate of that particular tree in Genesis chapter 3. This means that Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 is letting you know that they had this knowledge based on Torah or teachings of God. When God was teaching them before the serpent showed up, God taught them knowledge of good and evil. Now, if God is teaching you stuff, don't you get it deep inside of your soul? Men teach you and you learn the Torah, you learn something else. But when God teaches you, you don't have it? No, he taught them in chapter 1 and chapter 2 as soon as he brought them into existence. So he taught them his Torah, and Torah is the knowledge of good and evil, the way you should walk. So they should walk in the path that does not include eating from that particular tree. Just like again, Deuteronomy 30 verse 19, I put two paths. Choose life. Choose the path of life. That is the teaching of Torah. He taught them the knowledge already. So let's wrap it up now that you understand. The image of God then means you are an actualization of the divine. Look at actualize from the dictionary. Make a reality of. All right? You're making something real. Now, if the image of God that he made them in is an actualization of the divine, then that means you cannot get any closer expression of the divine than man, than physicality. Which is why it says in Hebrews 1:3 that Christ was the express image. Because God is only going to be expressed in physical body like man, since we're talking about people in this case. So, even the New Testament is letting you understand that for God to be revealed or expressed, you're going to have physicality. The heavens declare the glory of God. Firmament shown its handiwork. Why? Because that's how God is expressed, through physicality. That's why I got a lesson coming up one day whenever I get to it, that God is really not a spirit. God is physical. He is matter. But that's for another time. So the image of God it means you are an actualization of the divine. So for God to come and live in his own creation, he had to come in the form of man. So when he says, let us make man, male and female, he was expressing himself in male and female form on earth. That's why even Christ could express himself physically, even though it's telling you that he was God. How can you be a manifestation of the divine and not have knowledge of good and evil pre-installed in you? So the only reason why he blew breath into man in Genesis 2 verse 7, and the only reason why he told them eat from this and eat from that but don't eat from that, was because he was making sure that there was an actualization of the stuff that they should do, which is coming from the Torah. The knowledge of what they should do is coming from the Torah. So the manifestation of the divine has the knowledge of good and evil already in it. That's why as soon as he made the man, he started to activate the stuff. Probably no different than as soon as you have a baby and your wife gives birth, you all start teaching the little baby little things. You're teaching them who you are by interacting with them. They already know your voice from the womb anyway. You're teaching them to hold things. You give them something, or you put your finger in their palm and they're learning to grip it. And you teach them how to talk, and you're teaching them to form better words as time goes on. You are teaching them, and when they start crawling, you say, no, stay away from there. You are teaching them things. Because they have this backdrop or this plate that stuff can be like written on according to the culture of how you live in your house and how you live in the world. So they already have the Torah, might I say, written in them. You are just actualizing it by forming it in the way that they should be cultured. So when God was telling them, eat from this and don't eat from that, the Torah was already breathed into them, but he is actualizing it or forming it, might I say, according to how they're going to move around in the garden and throughout the world that they will have dominion over. So for God to say that man has become is to have God speak a lie in the opening book of the Bible, if he, because he said the divinely manifested portrayal of God that was living in the garden has become a divine manifestation of God. That's what he said when he said the man has become as one of us. He was saying the divinely manifested God has become like God. How can you become like what you already are? And of course, we know, as I just showed, that they already had the knowledge of Torah even before they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This lesson just showed you a fatal Torah contradiction. They already knew what was right and wrong because God taught them. That's why when he came, he could be like, have you eaten of the tree that Torah taught you not to take from? Why? Because he knew he already taught them. If they ate from it and he never taught them, and he came, and let's say he would have still been mad because, well, they did something that I didn't want him to do, but I didn't tell them, he would have handled the situation differently. He might have still been upset, but he would have handled it differently. Okay, I didn't teach you that yet. I was hoping you wouldn't find it out yet, but I can see you stumbled into it, or how did you come upon it? Well, the serpent. And then he could still go on with his judgment. But the reason why he was angry immediately, even before questioning the serpent and so on, was because he had already given them his instructions. He's basically saying, I told you not to do this. Now, because you have done against what I instructed, against the knowledge that I've given you, I'm going to punish you. So they already had the knowledge taught to them by God before, and that's why he got angry, because he said, did you eat from the tree that I commanded, that I Torah commanded?